Hello and welcome back to That's Entertainment, our weekly podcast. This time is from the humble setting of my parents' place down in Spain. Notice I have a tan, and I'm definitely enjoying our week away with the kids. For those of you in lockdown, tough luck. It's a brilliant 24 degrees today, and gosh, I'm really happy to be here. Anyway, jumping straight into this week's news from last week. I think the key thing that popped up on my radar was the censorship by Twitter and other social media platforms on the New York Post article regarding Hunter Biden. I think this is concerning for several reasons, and we should actually just dip into this because I think it's important to explain to you how some of these things can impact Groovy. Last week, New York Post came out with an article related to the laptop associated with Hunter Biden. All the major tech platforms formed some kind of censorship. This led to the suspension of several accounts associated with the White House. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, came in and apologized for his company's handling of the situation, but to date, on Twitter, link to the New York Post is still in some form of restricted mode. I think this is a very interesting thing to get into a discussion about because censorship does seem to be on the rise and it affects advertising campaigns particularly so. So over the last year and a half, we've been encountering more and more restrictions hitting our ads for various films. And sometimes I'm talking about kids movies, PG movies. Sometimes the ads don't work. We have to re-upload them. They go through another process of moderation and then they pass. But in one particular case, we had our ad account suspended about 3 months ago for a client's campaign. And we were in discussions with the moderators on the side of the platform to try and figure out what was going on. And we kept on getting these, what I could only discern as automated responses. So I don't think we were even talking to a human. We seemed to be talking to a bot, just in the way that the information was coming through. So we kept prodding for several months. And then we received a notice about a month ago telling us that the account was completely closed and there was nothing that we could do. 2 days later, the account was reinstated and everything was fine, and no explanation was given, which leads me to believe the humans in charge are no longer in charge of what the algorithms are doing. And I think that's very worrying. If we are giving our control over to a series of programs and moderating the kinds of content that's out there, and the people in charge of them don't seem to be aware of what's causing the triggers with these algorithms in order to ban accounts or particular ads, then I think we're going to see a lot more of this happening in the future. So if you've got political documentaries or films that are tackling challenging causes or pieces of content, this is something that you're going to really have to be aware of, because essentially a film, particularly for a theatrical release, is on a very short fuse. You have something booked into cinemas and it's launching that week, and all of a sudden you have a problem with an ad platform. That could be devastating. That means that the ad does not get off the ground and no one gets to hear about the film. I think the regulation that will be coming, and it's definitely going to be coming because the conservatives over in the US, particularly on the Republican side, seem to be incensed by this, is not going to do much good either. And I really, really do think that these things need to be discussed, but I don't know what the solution is right now, other than going back to being completely pro-free speech. Some good news this week. Cinemas around the New York area are starting to open up as of the 23rd of October. Will this translate into Hollywood being more willing to open up their industry and start to release more of the slate? Obviously this is something that we think would help the international exhibitor chains. We've been in discussions with quite a few different cinema operators, and one of the main pieces of feedback that we're hearing is that the slate is lacking. Asger Fluger, CEO of the Scandinavian chain Nordisk Biograf, came out with a statement recently that said cinemas lack movies, not audiences. And Thomas Vinterberg's flick that stars Mads Mikkelsen, called Druk, or in English, Another Round, released locally on the 24th of September in Denmark, and was the best performing Danish movie in 3 years, despite the COVID protocols and despite the cinemas only being at 70% capacity. I think, and this is something that we've also picked up from the industry, is that reduced capacities are not hurting the sales of cinema tickets in the ways that the studios are picking up on. Some of the reports I've heard that from calculations that have been run is that actual impacts on ticket sales are only 7%, because cinemas never really sold out in the first place prior to COVID, and were always, rarely at full capacity. Universal Pictures International in France is opening the Trolls World Tour with 650 prints, which is a fairly wide release on October the 14th to coincide with the country's half-term. The CEO, Xavier Albert, was recently quoted as saying, "Since the reopening of theatres in June, there has been a real demand for family films in the theatres. It is without a doubt the segment of the audience where there is currently the most potential." It's also interesting to note that PVOD releases are not allowed in France because of the strict laws on release windows. Now for some of the more troubling news. AMC Entertainment says cash will be largely depleted by the end of the year. A major debt restructuring over the summer brought in several $100 million in cash and reduced interest payments and extended loans, and close to $40 million raised by selling shares. But that situation is completely up in the air due to the unknown magnitude and duration of the pandemic. According to a recent SEC filing, the company is therefore exploring asset sales, joint ventures, and minority investments. Also, studios are not considering US cinema purchases. The heads of Universal and Warner told Deadline they both have no plans to do that currently, despite that being a legal option for studios for the first time in over 70 years, with the 1948 Paramount Decree abolished this summer. And also another big movie is moving to PVOD. The Paramount title by Eddie Murphy, Coming to America 2, will be moving to Amazon Prime for a reputed $125 million. In other news from in and around the industry, Disney announced a restructure of its media and entertainment divisions to aggressively support the growth of their new streaming services. Bob Chapek said the restructure was designed to support the incredible success of Disney Plus and our plans to accelerate our direct-to-consumer business. At MITCOM this year, HBO Max emerged as a real buying force, buying many high-profile shows for the US market. HBO Max begins its global rollout next year. Recent research from the British Film Institute, the BFI, in the UK showed a huge growth of streaming services during the lockdown period. 3 million adults gained access to a streaming service for the first time during that period. Data from the UK's official charts company showed that more than 21 million rental transactions were made in the 6 months to June 30th, with an average of 600,000 rentals per week before lockdown, climbing to more than 1 million rentals per week thereafter. For those of you who've been following Groovy for some time, one of our biggest bugbears, as you well know, is this issue of tracking within the PVOD markets, particularly transactional VOD on things like Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. We'll keep repeating this because it's important. If you release a movie to those platforms, you can wait up to sometimes 3 months before you actually get the reporting back on how sales have progressed. This development with the official charts company in the UK is a very interesting one because it finally starts to offer some insights into what's going on week by week with sales. To date, releasing to a theatre is more transparent, funnily enough, than going towards the TVOD platforms like iTunes, for instance. And the reason for that is simply the rights are usually controlled by aggregators and they have to batch upload content. Your content will be bundled with several other films during that upload, and so any ability to individually track a film is usually wiped out by that. And it's a serious issue that we need to start pushing the major tech platforms more on to open up their services. Major tech platforms are never going to invest the time into sorting out licensing. This is why we need specialist companies to do the service of aggregation. But if they're going to offer some kind of bulk upload process, they also need to differentiate between titles to make it trackable, because to date, home entertainment department in a distribution business relies on the performance of the theatrical release. Because again, you get the numbers 2 or 3 days after the premiere, whereas if you release directly to home entertainment, it can sometimes be months before you know what's going on. And this really needs to change. That's wrapping up our show this week. Lots going on. We'll continue to keep you posted. We'll be back to you next week, but probably at that point from rainy Denmark instead of sunny Spain. Quick question for you guys down in the comments below if you want to get involved with the show. How will cinemas and VOD platforms learn to live together in the future? Are there any lessons that they can learn from each other currently going on? And we're seeing a lot of innovation in this space, particularly amongst cinema chains like Alamo, which have moved on to a home demand service. Curzon, which have been doing this for years. What's the future hold? These are the companies that were kind of first out of the block with these strategies. We're hearing rumors across Europe that this will be pursued by other cinema companies shortly, so we'll have some updates sent. Tell us what you think in the comments below, and you can read more about the stories that we've highlighted in this week's show in the blog post that's associated with this post that we're putting into LinkedIn and YouTube now. Have a great week, guys. That's entertainment. Talk to you soon. Bye.